Today we have a treat for you. We would like to welcome Mary Gooneratne, who's the co-founder and COO of Loopscale. As many of you probably already know, Loopscale is a modular borrowing and lending protocol that is reshaping how credit works in DeFi, and it's deployed on Solana. But Mary actually has a remarkable background. She started as a software engineer at Google quite a while ago, right? And developed a passion for machine learning, as many people do nowadays, right? And she went on to co create Phoenix, which is a machine learning platform for the Department of Defense, which was later acquired. So that is quite the roller coaster there. And today she runs operations at Loopscale, where she's helping guide the company through the challenges of a startup and rapid growth on the Solana ecosystem. Thanks a lot, Mary, for being on.
Thank you so much for having me. Very excited to have this conversation.
It's a pleasure. To kick things off, the first question I always ask guests is, what should people take away from this conversation? Like, why should they stay and watch the episode?
Hopefully they get some interesting information out of it, but I mean, mostly want to kind of share more about Loopscale and kind of what we're doing that's different, not just in Solana DeFi, but in DeFi more broadly, and kind of what it takes to work on something like this, as well as what they can get from it.
I find your journey, your career so far fascinating. You know, from machine learning to working in a big tech company such as Google to switching to Web3. I would like to ask if you could walk us through, how you went along that path and what drove you to become a founder.
Yeah, I mean, as you alluded to, I was a little early on the machine learning craze, unfortunately. But yeah, so I that was kind of the start of my career, and I had originally studied engineering at Duke, which was where I met my co-founder. And I kind of was always very curious and guided by just different problems that I found interesting. And at that time, it was machine learning. And so, kind of the first subset of problems I worked on within that space was focused on speech recognition and federated models within speech recognition. And then, kind of started working on more computer vision models and in a different sector, obviously with Phoenix, and that was also with Luke. That was our first startup together, and that was working on different machine learning models, specifically within defense and contracting for the DoD. And then, kind of as we wrapped that up with the acquisition, that was kind of what started my journey into Web3. And I think it timed similarly for a lot of people around COVID. And then, especially for us, we had a lot more time on our hands. And you kind of just have more time to learn about things that people are talking about. And I think the thing that was really interesting for me, especially, so Luke comes from a bit more of a finance and economics background. And so it felt like kind of a whole new world for me of like, on one side, it's engineering focused problems, which I felt very comfortable with. But then on the other side, there was a lot of finance and economics, which I felt completely new to. And it felt like an exciting way to develop a new interest and curiosity alongside something that I felt like was a tool kind of under my belt already.
That's amazing. I feel like COVID brought so much momentum to Web3. I remember those days very well still. Like it's been more than 5 years, right? And still like, wow,
Yeah.
it was
Yeah, people have nothing to do besides be online. And I feel like you kind of see the effects of that now of when it's like a holidays or anything where people can get off the internet, the space slows down, people aren't responding as much or on Twitter as much, which is probably good for a lot of different reasons, but momentum of the
yeah.
ecosystem suffers.
Yeah, totally. Then the next question is, of course, related to your current company. Why did you start it? Which gap did you guys identify that you felt wasn't being addressed properly and you wanted to address it?
Yeah, so it's kind of evolved in some ways, like very much stayed the same since we first started it, which I feel like is crazy considering how many times we pivoted from the early days. But when we started, what was then called Bridge Split back in late 2021. The idea was that with a lot of crypto and DeFi protocols at the time, you were very focused on a very specific type of asset that looks a lot like Sol and ETH and Bitcoin today, where it's very liquid. You can instantly price and liquidate it with a fine amount of accuracy. And so these algorithmic models, whether that's for trading and it looks something like Uniswap, or algorithmic models for lending and it looks something like Aave, we're very focused on that type of asset class in that you were approximating a lot of things that you could only approximate due to those specific traits of those assets. And the vision that we thought was kind of the best end state and the real end state for DeFi, which I think is kind of we're getting closer to today, is that we're going to see a lot more traditional finance and sophisticated assets coming on chain. And kind of what makes up most of the value in the real world, whether that's like land or commodities, doesn't look like what a crypto asset looks like. And it can take a long time to liquidate those assets. Pricing gets updated quarterly. Or like a loan, for example, it's not this like variable rate product. And so when we first started Bridge Split, it was this idea that the asset space and surface area in DeFi is going to grow kind of exponentially from here. And the DeFi primitives we have today are just a huge mismatch from that future and what they can support. And so that's kind of what inspired taking this more first principles approach to lending. And then I think you can see that kind of breakdown in more specific ways when it comes specifically to lending and the trade-offs between pool-based models and order books. But I think ultimately it's, yeah, about what kind of surface area you have from an innovation and product support and capabilities perspective, that's really required, in my opinion, for the next year or 5 years of DeFi.
Awesome. Yeah, that's definitely a very cool gap that you guys identified. I want to double click on what you mentioned in your previous answer towards the beginning. There were multiple chains, right, when you guys started a few years ago, and at that point in time, I feel like maybe Solana wasn't what it, at the level of popularity where it is today. So I was really wondering how you decided to choose to build on Solana.
Yeah, I think it's so funny because we learned about like Solana in person from someone, which like I feel like just goes to show how small it was at the time that like I didn't learn about it on Twitter. Like I don't remember last time like someone told me about a chain in person. But we had originally started building on Ethereum and kind of grew frustrated with it because that was like all-time highs, I think, for ETH. And every time we wanted to deploy a contract, you were paying like $1,000. And so, like, the room to explore products and iterate and find product market fit felt like they were shrinking just in terms of how much it was costing to experiment. And then there was also aspects of that that kind of limited the creative surface area in what we wanted to do. It was like, okay, we want to fix like algorithmic money markets, so let's build an order book, but every time you want to place an order, it's like $20, and there were just certain limitations in the design space. And so we started exploring other chains, and we kind of started with Polygon, and Polygon was on testnet at the time. So I think we actually participated in like their testnet hackathon, if I'm remembering that correctly. And so that was again driven, and so it seemed like it was like solving our issues. It was like okay, 1 cent transactions, 20-cent transactions, and then somewhere in that journey, we were at Bitcoin Miami and met uh, Edgar and Barrett, who are both kind of still in Solana right now. And they were like, "Do you know about Solana?" And we were like, "No, we haven't heard of that." And we tried Solana for the first time. And I think you have the journey where it's like the first time you just even use it as a consumer or user, and then the first time you build on it, that kind of where you're not worrying about your limitations and where you stop thinking about the chain entirely in terms of like what can or can't I do, and it's just kind of this open platform and you are only using it for its benefits and thinking about it in the context of how can I like use this as an advantage. I think then you just stop like worrying about the chain. And I think I've been asked a number of times since then of like, oh, do you think about this chain ever or that chain ever? And the answer so far has always been no, for that same reason of like we haven't flipped into this mode of thinking about how it's negatively affecting us, and it's way more positively affecting the business.
Yeah, totally. No, those are some really strong points, and I do remember. those moments when there was some launch of something and everyone was rushing on Ethereum and gas prices just skyrocketed. So that was definitely uh frustrating. Yeah. Um
Yeah, especially when you're like a new user and you're just playing around for the first time. So it's not like you're moving around a ton of money. It's like you're moving $50 and it's like, okay, I swapped this and now I have somehow $20 less than what I started with.
yeah, yeah, totally. Moving to the next question. This is one of the sort of like more spicy questions we have on the pod. And as a founder, this is one of those questions that you think about maybe for a long time. But what was the moment that most tested your resilience and leadership?
Yeah, I think if you asked me that like 6 months ago, it would have taken me a long time to think of an answer. But I definitely, so I think as some people know, we had an exploit shortly after our launch back in April of this year. And so that was, I mean, by far that just kind of sticks out like a sore thumb in terms of moments that test your resilience. And it's an interesting kind of moment like in that it's both a short-term test of like how you react over that week, and then it's also a longer-term test of okay, you're like finally getting some traction and then you kind of have this huge thing knock you sideways, and how do you rebuild back up from that. So I definitely point to that in terms of kind of the biggest test for us both as like founders and also as a company.
Yeah. I think that's probably like a very good segue to my next question, which is, what's one of the biggest wins, like a clean win, that you're most proud of?
Yeah, I mean, so well, treating that as a segue, I think definitely being like, I think we're growing quickly now and in a really great position. And there's actually something that I recently spoke with Michael from Euler that stuck with me. And he said, we were just talking about, because obviously Euler had a big exploit. And he was just talking about it's already, you have kind of all the odds stacked against you as a startup. And so if you're growing, that's a really great thing. But if you are a DeFi startup, not just a startup, but you've been hacked and you're still growing after that, that means you have something there in terms of a product that people love. And so that kind of takeaway from that, all of that, and the fact that we are growing and growing exponentially is something that I'm super excited about and I view as a huge win. And I couldn't have asked for anything better kind of while we were in the depths of it.
Definitely. Yeah, I think you guys did a fantastic job. Um,
Thank you.
Also, another segue to what's cooking? What's in the works, short term, long term at Loopscale?
Yeah, so I mean, we've got a lot in the works. Like, it's sometimes hard for us to keep track of everything that's going on. But for us, like the real bread and butter is all the ways we can differentiate, right, the end user experience specific to our architecture and how do we actually compete. And that comes down to assets we support and the ways we can give people both borrowing products and lending products that they can't get anywhere else. And so a lot of our roadmap is focused on different variants of those integrations. So we have a lot of exciting real world asset products coming out, tokenized real world assets that'll be supported as collateral on Loopscale that I'm super excited about just because we had kind of an initial launch with Henri recently that went really well. We make up 40% of their minted supply now. And I think we've really been able to showcase ourselves as a place where asset issuers for real world assets can come to really scale their assets. And it's not somewhere you come to after you've reached some initial scale, and we will help you grow. So excited for a series of those launches, as well as kind of some more DeFi native launches we have lined up around kind of right now we support Orca liquidity positions, but there's obviously a lot more DEXs and LP types for us to support that I think will unlock a lot of liquidity because they're not supported elsewhere. So those are kind of what we have going on the asset front. But we're also pretty excited about building out just like different integrations where we can make the borrowing and lending flow more tightly knit with either DeFi or fintech companies, where you kind of have this DeFi mullet back end, and you're supporting these interesting use cases across the spectrum, and not just for folks that have a wallet that are coming to kind of arb some trade or do something super like DeFi native.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Awesome. That sounds very exciting. Now we're at the closing part of the pod where we have the rapid fire questions, uh, which I would like to ask you to answer as short as possible, like in one sentence if possible. The first question is, which tool would you like, one piece of tech which you would never live without?
Like my non-founder, I mean, it's my Kindle, I feel like was the first thing that came to mind when I saw this question. I just feel like I love that thing.
Okay.
There's
Yeah.
probably something more rational I could think of.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you need to have something to read to uh yeah, pass the time and explore. There's one more which is very interesting and funny to me. What's one myth about crypto or DeFi that drives you crazy?
It's this broader idea that finance is like inherently evil versus like the main kind of force for human progress. Like I feel like everyone I went to school with, it was like, oh, if you're going into finance, you're a bad person. It's like, all right, sounds good.
That's funny. We had Jonathan from Asymmetric Research on our previous episode, and we asked him to ask a question to the next guest, which is you. So his question was, "What's your job?" And he also, provided a video for more context regarding that question, which you've already seen. So I'm asking the question after you've seen the video. What's your job?
Yeah, and so for anyone listening to this, the video was this MIT professor who was suggesting that your job is about kind of way more than what you do, which I think as founders, you're kind of trained to think about it that way. But I would say my job is to build a financial system where finance can work better for everyone and at the same time require less kind of manual work of everyone.
Nice. That's a great one. And what would be the question you would like to ask the next guest who we're going to have on?
Assuming it's a founder, the question I thought of was, what is your favorite feature of your own product?
Okay, that's a good one. That's a great one. Thank you. I'm betting they will love to answer that one. Well, Mary, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thanks again for agreeing to be a guest on our podcast. Do you have any closing remarks? Anything like where can people find you? Where can people connect and learn more about Loopscale?
Yeah, so Loopscale, you can play around. We're open live to the public, loopscale.com. And I'm on Twitter, Telegram, everything is my first name and my last name. So I would love to hear from anyone.
Awesome. Well, you've heard it, folks. If you want to chat with Mary, just write her a message on X or Telegram. Thanks again, Mary. It's been a pleasure having you on.
You too. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.